Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Hello, Edward. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I thought that we would start this conversation very quickly with you, sort of in a quick overview of what Zero Hash does, just so people understand, get the context of our conversation.
Yeah, so Zero Hash is a technology and regulatory infrastructure business that we founded in 2017. And effectively, we power infrastructure across the crypto, blockchain, stablecoin space, powering groups such as Morgan Stanley, Stripe, Franklin Templeton, BlackRock. And we solve what is ultimately a complex technical question. How do you use this technology? And abstract away those complexities and make it easy for the largest enterprises to leverage this stack. We power about companies worth about $2 trillion build on our infrastructure today. 3 GSIBs, one of which we've announced, which is Morgan Stanley.
Okay.
So building that infrastructure.
Okay, very excited. So obviously, the first thing that happens when we do these, have these conversations, we plan for you, one Googles you, and the first thing that pops up is MasterCard offered to buy you for $2 billion, and you walked away from the deal. Well, what do you know that they don't?
So look, it's an odd situation for a founder to have to talk about these things. We live in a world where there's leaks, and so
we love leaks.
Yes, we know. Look, we think we're 8 years into the journey. We still think we're really early in terms of where this technical adoption is. Just very simply, we think of this as a technical question in terms of distribution of this technology. There's about 2 billion people globally that now have access to a stablecoin account through their native financial service provider. And so the way that I think about this is that this distribution, this technology is being created almost like the iPhone, and now we're building the application layer. And so I really think we're really early in terms of this distribution. And when you look at the technical advances, if you look at any thematic that exists, whether it be tokenization of equities, stablecoins play a critical part of unlocking a lot of the value propositions. If you look at agentic commerce, agent-to-agent communication,
Right.
I truly believe stablecoins are going to be a critical unlock in terms of a distributed, fragmented world. How do these agents communicate? How do you transfer tokenized data with money? Stablecoins allow that through programmability and through access. So look, we're really early, and I think there's some massive themes that are still early to be played out, and we're at this very much at this inflection point.
Are you still in conversations from other strategic partners, perhaps, to support the business?
Yeah, look, we're not going to be drawn on those topics, but look, our goal is to build a really big business. There's a mark out there which we said no to. Of course, as a private company, there's always something that you look at and say yes. When we look at whether we acquire companies or be acquired or go public, we have a simple framework. Does this accelerate our vision? Is this good for our team? And that's it. It's quite a simple framework.
So now you've applied to national regulator, OCC. I'm wondering how does that change your business? How does that change things for your clients, whether on Wall Street or wherever? Does that enhance things? How does it change?
Yeah, so as a business that is in it's a complex business. There's obviously a lot of nuances and risk around cryptography. There's a lot of news out there right now in terms of what AI can do from a cybersecurity perspective. And crypto is unique in the sense that when the money moves, it's moved. It's irreversible. And so that uniquely places this technology that can unlock a lot of value. There's also some unique risks. And so when you're working with large financial institutions, we are ultimately selling trust. That is what we provide. And so far, the regulatory landscape continues to shift globally, whether it be the EU, whether it be the United States. And today, Zero Hash is regulated by every single state. And so we operate money transmitter licenses. We then have additional licenses. We have a state chartered trust in North Carolina. And the OCC trust gives us more flexibility, particularly around the stablecoin part of our business. And it also, frankly, gives us optionality as the dynamic shifts and kind of the legislative landscape changes.
Do you, at some point, because right now you're almost like the invisible infrastructure behind all this, and you have clients like Stripe and BlackRock and all these other At what point do you actually, become a rival to these guys as you grow and expand the business?
Yeah, so our goal is not to compete with our clients. We have, 10 million end clients today. So we operate effectively a B2B2C business. To the point of trust and being trusted, we part of that is not competing with your partners. And look, I think fundamentally from a business perspective, in an infrastructure business like this, we operate with B2C margins with a B2B cost structure. And so for us, strategically, we think it's very, very attractive to be sitting in this space where we bring enterprises, banks that have built millions of customers over 40, 50, 60, even 100 years plus, and enable them instant access to this technology. And that's kind of how we view ourselves strategically.
So just to help me think it through, when you say the B2C margins versus B2B infrastructure, you just mean you have to be as big as possible for this to work, right?
We don't have the CAC of acquiring end customers. We effectively get every Morgan Stanley customer instantly becomes a zero hash customer legally and technically. And we offer those customers crypto and stablecoin and tokenization infrastructure. So that's what I mean. It's we don't have the CAC of going out and acquiring millions of end customers. And we have a B2B cost structure. We're 200 and plus people. But I think we punch much above our weight because of the partnerships that we have. Yeah.
And by CAC, you mean cost acquisition cost?
Yes.
Just in case people heard K at the end of that.
Yeah.
So for executives in this room who are seeing a company like yours expanding and growing, and they haven't, particularly if they're in the financial sector, they haven't really thought about stable coins as a serious part of their outlook. I mean, what do you say to them? What do they need to be doing now? Why should they be in stable coins?
Yeah, so I think really stablecoins are a global instant value transfer mechanism. And so every business ultimately moves value or money in some capacity.
Yeah.
And so we view stablecoins as being a very, very powerful alternative payment method. And obviously where we're started, is where velocity of money, what we call velocity of money, really matters. And so where velocity of money has really mattered, for example, is in the trading space. So we power, for example, interactive brokers with stablecoin account funding. People want to trade on a Saturday. They want to trade on an event. We power groups like Kalshi for stablecoin account funding if you want to make a trade on a Sunday. That's very difficult through traditional rails. And then just in terms of the global unlock that this provides, is stablecoins is actually a global mechanism of value transfer, what people sometimes term a network of networks, being able to transfer value from anywhere to anyone at any time. And that is the powerful unlock. And so if you have a two-sided marketplace, you're able to move money more effectively. We have a client, for example, Gusto, which powers some of the largest and broadest range of global businesses that are paying out freelancers and contractors, being able to pay people more effectively and quickly. So look, we believe that stablecoins will grow as a wallet share in terms of money movement, but not only take and cannibalize existing wallet share, but actually open up new opportunities that otherwise people wouldn't have the option to do.
One of the big themes here this week has just been discussing with different types of businesses how the role that AI plays in changing or transforming, in some cases, the executives' businesses. We already have AI agents sort of already on, making financial decisions at kind of like super speed on these platforms. How, if there's an error or something goes wrong here, who's responsible if this happens? If this becomes a sort of more common way that things work on these platforms?
Yeah, so look, on the topic of agentic, I actually think that cryptography can add a huge level of control. And so, for example, being able to authorize the agent actually embedded cryptographically in terms of what the agent can do in terms of spending money in particular can be done through example, you give the agent some degree of control, but cryptographically, potentially a human needs to get involved in that activity. So those are some of the innovations that we're building is around how do you cryptographically create controls tied to the agent, tied to the spending of money, actually in a very similar way to how we do that with humans today, in the sense that when we move stable coins, you don't want one human to be able to move all of the money that exists, right? That's how treasury financial services firms exist. And so we really view agents as part of that suite of people that can move or authorize to move money. And if you can embed that into the controls, that's really, really powerful. I think that's a defensive posture. In terms of offensive, in terms of what it can do, the opportunity of what it can do as well, if you think about agents communicating with other agents, media companies, right? Semafor. How does it work in an agentic world where I don't go to click on this link today? I can go to ChatGPT and say, what did Edward Woodford say today? And maybe it says, I didn't say anything very interesting. But the critical point is that Semafor is not going to get the clicks. They're not going to get the links. And so there's a question of economics that exist. And so think of this on a global scale. Millions of content creators. Everybody creates value in this sense. How do you actually have an LLM actually communicate with the data provider in a distributed world where there's no centralized authority? That is where stablecoins, one, can come in because they're global, they're programmable. And that's where, for example, on the programmability point, for example, Semafor could get a tiny fee for that stream. And then effectively, you can create a DVP settlement where you have a tokenized data from what has been said today for a small amount of money. Similar to the way how Spotify pays creators for their music. That's how we view the world going. And so, we're starting to deploy smart contracts where you can effectively have an LLM transfer tokenized data, tokenized what is ultimately value, in exchange for another piece of value, which is stable coins. And that's where we see the opportunity in agentic.
Yeah, that's a really interesting model if that you can pull that off. As we're coming to the close, I think it's really important we talk about the economy and kind of how you see things shaping up. I mean, listen, there've been tariffs have hit, capital's pulling back. We've got, conflict going on that's creating a lot of uncertainty. Yeah. I mean, if, heaven forbid, there's a recession, I mean, how does this work for your sector as well as your business? But how does it work for the sector in terms of just how it impacts its future growth? Is it even an opportunity here? I'd be interested in how you're thinking about this space.
Yeah. Look, I mean, we as a business in 8 years, there's businesses here that have been around for a lot longer, but everything in our space has been compressed. So we've gone through multiple cycles. And so thinking about how you scale that is important. Yeah. I think for us, how we think about this is being a global business is important, and being a diversified business across our 3 key verticals of trade, transact, and tokenize, and providing services across that and trying to scale that. But I think, look, I think what's sometimes forgotten in these rooms is, look, 70% of Americans can't afford a $1,000 shock to the system. Large portions of the world struggle. And so the importance of what stablecoins can do is it can increase the velocity of money. And when you increase the velocity of money, you don't need things like payday loans. You don't need people to take out debt. And so, for example, what we've done with Gusto is what has typically taken 5 to 7 to 10 days to pay people in the Philippines, those people are getting paid instantly as soon as they create their work. And that adds value. And so as we think about the world more generally and shocks to the system, I do personally believe that velocity of money helps everyone and is accretive to everyone, and especially in tough times.
And does that have more of an impact in, say, especially because I cover developing countries, does that have more of an impact in those kinds of economies, or will we see it more in the wealthier countries?
I think it's going to be a global phenomenon, and velocity of money matters to a lot of people around the world, including here in the United States.
Okay, Edward, this was a great conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Please welcome Andy Yen of Proton and Reid Albergotti of Semafor.
Hey. Andy, thanks for being here.
Yes, it's a pleasure.
So first question, how does a particle physicist at CERN end up starting an encrypted email company?
That's a good question.
Interesting career trajectory.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't on purpose. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Right. Actually, I was originally going to go finish my PhD and probably become a professor somewhere. But back in 2013, which is around when we started, 2014 was when we officially launched. Actually, Snowden showed the world really that surveillance and privacy is a real problem. And what I thought was, well, it's interesting that the NSA is doing all these things. But if I look at what Google, Facebook, and now OpenAI know about us, it is way more. So the bigger problem is actually not government surveillance, but corporate surveillance. And as a physicist, you learn how to program, you know how to write code. And I thought, okay, well, I'm in a position to actually fix this problem. And what was interesting was originally we built a service that was just used by scientists within CERN. And then opening to the public, on the first day, 10,000 people came and got an account. Now, I think a decade and 100 million users later, I think we see very clearly now that there is a demand for more privacy and more security online. This was not obvious 12 years ago when we began, but it sort of became true over the decade. And this is really sort of how we came onto this journey. It was really just a product that I myself wanted that turned out the world also sort of wanted as well.
Yeah, and how's the company doing now? How many users do you have? How big is it?
Yeah, well, we serve 100 million customers around the world. And a lot of those, in fact, are also businesses. There's over 100,000 organizations that also use our services. We started with Proton Mail as the main product, but then we actually got to Proton VPN, and then we built out the entire workspace ecosystem. And the company's based in Europe, so we have around 600 employees. The vast majority, maybe 90%, are based in Europe. And it's really a European tech player that is, in many ways, competing with Google and Microsoft in providing core productivity services. And we see demand really taking off, especially in the last 2 years, as Europe looks to see how they can diversify their tech base, where they buy the tech from, and really pursue the vision of tech sovereignty in Europe. And this is something that is driving growth quite dramatically, especially in the past 12 months.
So lately, you've become also kind of a spokesman on the privacy implications of AI, of all these LLMs. What specifically concerns you about what's happening today?
Well, today, a lot of people, the first point that people see privacy in their lives historically on the internet was clearing their browser history, right? That was sort of the first touch point that we all got with privacy. And we did that because maybe there was some Google searches that we thought were sensitive that we wanted to hide from whoever might look if we die, right? And if you think about what Google knows about you from search, and then you compare that with what an AI that is having a conversation with you knows, the AI knows a lot more. And I would also say that the view that a lot of people have is a bit skewed because we, let's say the bit older people like us, we tend to use AI almost as a replacement for search. It's like a more efficient way to search. But if you were to go to look at today's teenagers and how they use AI, they use AI as a companion in life. So we actually may not give AI that much information, but the younger generation, well, the AI at this point probably knows them better than their parents, in fact. And that's a very scary concept. It's really what Google and Meta pioneered with surveillance capitalism, now on steroids. And that's why I think we should be concerned, because all the things that went wrong with that model is also going to go wrong with this model as well.
Yeah, there's a lot more than just a companion that people are doing. They're using as a therapist, as a romantic companion even. That's a pretty popular use case. But as people put all this information into these LLMs, and companies gather that for whatever it is, training, et cetera, they all say they're anonymizing it. So what's the harm? Like what harm will befall the person who uses this as a therapist? Well, which is not me, by the way, but.
There's a couple of harms. One, if you are training LLMs on the inputs that you put in, there can be so-called accidents where the stuff that you give to LLM gets put out again as an answer that it gives to somebody else. And there's been very examples of corporate data that got uploaded to ChatGPT that then appeared somewhere else in an answer. And if you're clever with prompting, you can actually extract that data back out of the LLM pretty easily. So there's, of course, the data security and privacy.
This is where it would have to end up in the training data, and then it would be in a pre-trained model, and then so I'd say, what's Andy's like most intimate secrets, and then it would spit that back out to me because it's in the training data.
Yeah, and sometimes it would it would know this company, this information. So because the LLM at the end of the day is kind of a black box. What goes in can come out in ways that you don't really expect. So I think that this is one problem, this data privacy and security issue. But if you go a bit beyond that, we today don't really know, at least you and I sitting on the stage and people in the audience, how the LLM is trained, what data it's used, what biases it may or may not have. And I would actually argue even that people at companies like Anthropic and OpenAI probably also don't precisely know the answer to that. And of course, a lot of our things today are built using American LLMs. But if you look globally, in fact, a lot of the companies abroad, especially in Europe, are actually using open Chinese models, which are trained with different data, with different set of biases and different opinions about various things. So LLMs, in some sense, is a way of influence. It is the interface in which most of us in the future will interact with the broader world. And the biases of an LLM can much more effectively shape what we as a society believe is correct and not correct versus social media of the last 10 years. So that's the other danger, that if we're not careful in regulating and controlling how these models are used and deployed, can take us to a very scary place at a much accelerated pace. The typical tech revolutions in the past have taken a decade, maybe 2 decades to really transform. And with LLMs, this is probably going to be compressed to a matter of 3, 4, or 5 years.
Interesting. So the other thing that I think in talking to a bunch of people here, they're pretty freaked out about this mythos, this Anthropic mythos model that can find vulnerabilities in code. Have you gotten any access to that? Have you asked for access to try to look at Proton Mail's code and find vulnerabilities?
Yeah. So we've asked for access. We haven't gotten it yet, but we also,
Who did you ask?
Huh?
Do you ask Dario? Are you at that? You shoot Dario?
Well, there's people that we know that we can ask, right? And then of course we've also used other LLMs to check our code, and it's true. LLMs are effective at finding vulnerabilities. Are they more effective than humans? Actually, no. I would say humans are still better at this job.
Even Mythos?
Well, haven't run it myself yet, so I cannot comment on that, right? But the difference between, there's a difference between being good at something and being able to scale something. And what LLMs do is it lets you maybe not get to the maximum capabilities of humans, but you can get pretty close and massively scale it. So let me give you the example of kind of how something like this goes wrong. Today, if I were a hacker and I wanted to breach a company, well, the hacker is in fact a limited resource. There are only so many of them, and the good ones have to go through quite a bit of training to get to that level where they can actually attack a big corporation. That means the targets that you can go after are quite limited, because you've only got so many hours. There are only so many hackers. Like in the case of North Korea, they have a very limited selection of people that are in that unit that do this work. And that means you have to pick the biggest targets with the highest impact, where you can actually make the most money from going through a hack. What LLMs do is it, in some ways, to put it in a word, it's democratizing hacking. It is making it so that the barrier of technical competence and people resources that you need to carry out hacking campaigns at scale is far lower. And so in practice, what does this mean for, let's say, regular people out in the world? Well, your corner bakery probably in the past was not going to be targeted by the North Koreans because it wasn't worth it. But if you can democratize cyber attacks where it's much more easier to run at scale, then these smaller companies that in the past were simply ignored because they were not significant enough to be targeted, suddenly can be targeted, and also quite effectively as well. And so this is the risk. It's not the big companies that are going to suffer the most. It's actually maybe the small and medium businesses that will be most highly impacted.
And did Anthropic give you a reason why when they said no, you can't have Mythos?
Actually, they haven't responded yet, right? This is all very new. So
Why do you think they're not giving it to more people?
Well, my opinion is that it's a brilliant marketing scheme. It's fantastic. I got something so scary, I can't give it to everyone. Now everybody wants it. And is it really that revolutionary? I'm actually not sure, right? I actually, I take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, okay. If you guys want to get on the wait list for Proton Mail, by the way, it's very long, but talk.
That was how it started, but no longer.
There's also another security question. You're offering post-quantum encryption on Proton Mail, which means if and when quantum computers can get to the scale where they can crack encryption, I'll be safe if I use Proton Mail. If you talk to some, quantum experts, physicists, they'll tell you, I don't think you can guarantee that. Once we get to at-scale quantum computers, those post-quantum, security measures might not actually work. What do you say to that?
Yeah. So at Proton, we've prepared our systems to move to post-quantum algorithms very quickly, when the right time comes.
You can't do it yet?
Yeah.
I saw it on the website. I thought it was like...
Yes.
Yeah.
So what we're doing, a lot of other companies are doing, is we're preparing. We're getting to the point where if it happens, we can flip a switch and algorithms switch over to the new post-quantum algorithms. Now, post-quantum algorithms, this is something that is open source, validated, scientifically tested, and they are actually quantum resistant. So I'm pretty confident that if you look at the algorithms that have been standardized by NIST and have been tested by the scientific community, when we get to quantum computers, these will be resistant, these will be safe. So that concern that you've raised, I don't think is something that we need to be worried about too much. The switch from current algorithms to post-quantum is also not that difficult for most businesses, I would say. The comparison I kind of make is, Y2K. I don't know if you're, I suppose we're old enough. I'm older than I
remember Y2K.
To remember
the world
this, right?
didn't end, by the way.
Yes. People thought, the world is going to end. It's a bit the same with encryption. Now, the danger that we have with encryption is there is the attack where you can, store now, decrypt later.
Yeah.
And the theory is, governments around the world today are rapidly sucking up information everywhere that they can, even if it's encrypted, with the expectation that in the future, they'll be able to decrypt that. That is a real threat. But again, there's also ways to mitigate that. If you look at the bulk data that we encrypt today, the large amounts of data sets, those are encrypted with algorithms that already are not quantum vulnerable. So some people think the world is going to end. I personally think it's not going to end.
Yeah, but your encrypted chatbot therapy sessions, those will be decrypted in the future.
Well, actually, they're not even encrypted today. So, if you use Proton's Lumo AI, then yes, it is encrypted. But if you use ChatGPT, that can go out anytime.
It's out anytime.
All it takes is a single court order, right?
So age verification, big topic today on the internet, something you've talked about. You've got the Australia under 16 ban. You've got the UK Online Safety Act. Can we have age verification and identity on the web and anonymity and privacy at the same time?
It's interesting you asked the question because when I was flying in earlier this week, I saw actually a news article where the Trump administration is trying to convene a grand jury to unmask a Reddit user who criticized ICE. Now, imagine we go to a world where there's mandatory age verification, and every account on Reddit requires having a government-issued ID that is validated, stored by the service, and available for inspection. That would have case that we talked about just now would have a very different outcome.
Well, we all agree, that the downside of that, but there are ideas to do both, to where you could verify your identity in some way. This is sort of like the world
Sure.
coin idea, if you're familiar with that. We don't have to get into details, but there are these ideas out there. Is it possible?
I think there's the question of is it possible, and I can speak a little bit about how we might do it. But then there's also the question of should we do it? Since we're here in DC, there is something in the U.S. which some people might know called Section 702. This is the wireless surveillance capability that the government has. Section 702 was meant to be temporary and limited when it first came out. That's why it has to be extended every 3-4 years. What we see though is that without fail, every single time it's extended. And with each extension, it's also been expanded. And this is, so I think age verification, the question is, should we let the genie out of the bottle? Once you give the government a capability, I've very rarely seen a situation where they say, I'm going to willingly give up this capability and not expand it and abuse it in some way. So this is why I think we should be very cautious and probably shouldn't go there.
Oh, sorry, you're going to go into my, okay, you're going to answer my question.
Yeah, now I'm answer your question, yes. Right. Now, if you were to go there, how would you do it? I think there has to be a couple of principles. Number one, the scope should be limited. We should look at the places that has the biggest harm and restrict it to that. And today, if you look at France, if you look at Australia, they're very clear. France says we're going to go after pornography for minors because we think that is a social harm. And we're also going to ban minors from accessing social media. Zuck's not happy about that, but there's reasons for that. And there's studies, even a court case in the US recently that they lost that show actual harm comes from children using social media. So that's limited in scope compared to, say, the UK approach where they're doing everything. And that's a disaster. So I think it has to be very limited. Number two, you're not going to get a perfect solution. Perfection here, we should not strive, because to be perfect, you're going to have to get government IDs, you have to collect all the information, you're going to have to check a bunch of records, store a lot of personal information. And so perfection is actually a dangerous thing to pursue here. What we want to do is maybe get to 95, 98% effectiveness, which is still very effective for harm reduction, but at the same time, allow us to do things in a privacy protecting way. So how would I do it as a privacy expert, privacy engineer? I would actually do number one, local only. So age verification has to be done on your device without sending information to a remote server or a cloud somewhere. And then when you have, and that's usually done through facial recognition. Of course, there'll be some kids who look older who will get by, but that is part of the slippage that we have to be willing to accept here to have the right privacy, security compromise. And then after you have that local verification, the information sent to validate should never be, this is your exact age or even the photo, because that should be discarded right away. What should be sent is simply, are you over 18 or not over 18? So there are ways to do it technically in a secure way, but it's a slippery slope. And once the genie is put out of the bottle, I'm not sure we can put it back in. And I worry that this is something that governments are just going to keep on expanding over and over time. Just like Section 702.
Yeah. Okay. We got time for a couple more questions. You live in Europe.
Yeah.
How have the views of U.S. technology companies been changing in recent years?
Oh. Well, Europe doesn't really trust American tech anymore.
Why not?
And actually, even most Americans, many Americans don't trust American tech anymore. If you run the surveys here in the US, you see the same type of phenomenon. Now, we can talk about why, but I actually think to some extent, Europe probably never should have trusted American tech. Why? It's, at the end of the day, a supply chain issue. If you are today, let's say, sourcing all your energy from the Persian Gulf, it's not a good idea. If you were sourcing all your energy from Russia, like Europe is doing, it's also not a good idea. And it's also not sensible for Europe to source all this technology from the US. It's simply a big risk. And this is not a new risk. It wasn't that Trump came along and this risk suddenly became obvious. That risk has been there for 20 years. Maybe Trump accelerated the process of making that risk obvious to the world.
Are there things that he's done, like for instance, taking away the email accounts of International Criminal Court judges, things like that? Does that have an impact?
Yes, so when ICC was kicked off of Microsoft and had to come to Proton Mail, that obviously made it very clear. And then things like Cloud Act also put the legal precedent. Now, the question people in DC probably need to ask is, how should, from the US, how should Americans view this? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? And the argument that I would actually make is, from a geopolitical standpoint, it is actually in America's best interest for Europe to be technically strong. And let me explain this a little bit, and maybe a bit of history lesson, right? There was a reason why the US rebuilt Germany after World War II, because you want to have strong allies that are economically strong, not just because that's military power, but also because a strong middle class is a market for your goods and services. Today, technology is a bit like industrialization, 50, 100 years ago, 150 years ago. Without a strong tech basis on the European continent, actually Europe is going to be in economic decline, and that's already starting even today. So the trade-off that America will have to make is probably the biggest tech companies here are going to lose billions in revenue. But billions in revenue on a trillion dollar company is not a big deal, to be completely honest. Huh? So they're going to lose billions. But I think America is better off having its tech companies lose billions, but having an ally in Europe that is economically strong with a tech sector that is independent to some extent. It doesn't mean that Europe will completely decouple from the US. It's not going to eliminate all American tech, but the ratio cannot be 100% of your tech is imported. It has to probably be closer to 50-50.
In 46 seconds or less, who will win the AI race between the US and China?
I think China. And it's not
38 seconds to answer why.
Well, I would just give you an example. What is the American approach to AI? We're going to take a couple giant incumbents, fund them with lots of money, and hope they will be the most innovative companies. The Chinese approach is, I'm going to take 50 companies, I'm going to fund them all, they're going to fight to the literal death, and a couple survivors will be my champion. Which one is going to be more innovative? For sure, the Chinese approach. And the mistake that was made in the US was we failed to regulate the tech companies. This is not just the US, but also Europe. This is a joint failure of the Western world. By not regulating our tech companies, we allow monopolies to appear, and monopolies in the long run do not innovate as much as small competitive landscapes. And if you want the proof, look at electric cars, right? The Chinese electric car company industry was the most competitive in the world, and now it's the most innovative. So unfortunately, I think we need to bring antitrust back on the agenda, and that is how we win AI.
You didn't make the time limit, but thanks for the answer. It was great to chat with you.
Great.
Please welcome Ivan Espinosa of Nissan and Clay Chandler of Semafor.
I'm joined by Ivan Espinosa. I'm here at the wonderful, really quite stunning Nissan headquarters in Yokohama. Ivan's the CEO of Nissan, has been in the job for almost exactly one year now. Is that right? Yeah. It's an iconic company, very famous. And yet it's been through tremendous turmoil in the last, say, 10 years, and it has lost about $4 billion for the last 2 years. When they came to you and said, hey, do you want this job, did you pause a little bit and say, I'm not sure?
Well, yeah, thank you for the time and for having me. Well, indeed, the recent years have been difficult for Nissan, but I've been with the company almost 25 years. Actually, I'm running on my 23rd year now. And I've devoted my life to the company. So when the job offer came, at first I was surprised, very honestly, because I'm relatively young for a CEO in Japan. Yeah. I'm not Japanese.
Right.
So at the beginning it was a bit of a shock. I thought maybe I would be considered later on, but I was surprised. I was humbled and honored. I asked for some time to talk to my wife and my kids, and it was quick. So the decision was made over the weekend, and then I came back and said, I'm ready for it. Yeah.
Wow. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about the uniqueness of your selection. Does the fact that you're not Japanese and that you're younger than a lot of other executives here, does that hinder or help your way in leading the company?
I think it helps. It helps in the way that I have a very deep understanding. I've been 33 years with Nissan, working in many different roles, planning, but I also worked in marketing, in sales, in development. So I understand the company inside out, and I've been working in Japan 10 years already. So I have a very deep understanding of Nissan, its strengths, its weaknesses. And I think this plays to my advantage, the fact that people trust me because I've worked hand in hand and side by side with many of them. And they know that I understand the company well, that I understand what has to change. And that's why I was able of putting in place a plan in a matter of weeks, because I knew exactly what had to be done. So from day one, normally your CEOs are giving like a transition period. Right, you get like your 90 days or whatever. I was ready in 6 weeks with the plan. First thing was to put in place a team that is ready, a team that is embracing the same challenges and the same understanding of the challenges as me, a team that has perspective, And right after doing that, we put in place a plan, and we started to move with diligence, discipline, and speed.
It's really interesting. I love that phrase, knowing the company inside out, because it kind of captures, the characteristics of what your position is, and that you're an outsider, but you're also very much an insider. So you mentioned you had a plan in place in 6 weeks. Take us along a little bit in that initial 6 weeks, and how you sort of made your to-do list of what are we going to do in what order, and how do we move forward?
The first thing was to choose the right people for the executive leadership team. And as I was telling you, I've been with the company for quite a long time in many different locations. Yeah. So I had a broad network, and it was easy for me to pick the right people for the right jobs, because I knew already that we were going to have to resize the company, that we had to work on making our operations sharper and work with more speed, creating a more nimble organization, an organization that is communicating in a more quick and transparent way. So I knew who was the right people for the job. And this was, the first thing I did. And then right after having the team, we got into a room, and we were not leaving the room until we started to have clarity on what the priorities were. There were a lot of things already in my mind, which were complemented by the perspective and the views of the team. And we distilled the Nissan plan, as I said, in a matter of 6 weeks.
Let's talk just for a minute about some of the sort of nuts and bolts and the specifics of the cost cutting of the plan. I mean, Nissan had been through a couple of major restructuring plans previously that had not quite gotten traction. How did you determine on cost cutting, how far do we go to make sure that it actually is meaningful, and not only that it fixes our cash flow issues, but it also convinces the market?
The previous teams, back in 2014 or so, the strategy of a company was trying to hit 8 million car sales. Right. It never happened. We peaked at 5.7 or something like that. Yeah. And the reality was that the whole company structure grew to try and accommodate 8 million cars. Right. So what we did was, previous teams were trying to increase the volume at any cost, because we had a big structure that had to be absorbed. Right. And we couldn't, because when you take a step back, the industry is becoming more and more competitive. We have so many Chinese players now, that so it's not becoming easier to sell cars. So, and the teams before were trying to increase the volume, and we just came to realize that we need to face reality. We cannot grow our top line at the speed that we need to absorb the structure. So we said, what is the appropriate break-even point for our company, assuming that we cannot grow volume? It doesn't mean that we don't want to grow the volume, but let's stop putting pressure on ourselves on the volume. So let's admit that we are today a 3.2, 3.3 million car company, and let's resize our structure to bring the break-even point to something that makes sense today. And we made the decision to move from 17 plants to 10 plants. Wow. And it's very unfortunate, because many of these plants were icons of our history, and it touched many lives. Unfortunately, we had to reduce the workforce as well. We did that plan, as I said, in 6 weeks, and we very quickly got into it, because what I wanted to avoid was a very long restructuring story in the media, and this is not helping the company. So we really accelerated and said, we need to put this in place quickly, so that the bad news about Nissan are behind us, and we can start moving the communication.
You were talking earlier about the challenges of figuring out what the kind of right size is for production and what the right scale is, so that it works out with your costs and revenue. I mean, this is the endless challenge of the auto industry. And if you talk to industry analysts, they're always saying, the secret is you have to get bigger. Right. It sounds a little bit like the old sort of strategy of Carlos Ghosn, that that was the way forward. But Nissan seems to, on the one hand, sort of be beyond that, but then there are also continuous speculation about, could Nissan ally with somebody? Right. And obviously the discussions with Honda broke down. Then there has been this effort, the 2023 agreement with Renault, to kind of scale back its involvement and investment. But those doors aren't completely closed, are they? Or what's the status of discussion about potential allies for Nissan?
I'll tell you how I see partnerships. So partnerships, I see 2 or 3 different types of them. First, you have project-based partnerships, which is trying to work out some OEM supply of product with some other partner. And we do that a lot with Mitsubishi and with Renault.
Yeah.
We partner with them to help them complement our lineups in some part of the world, like Southeast Asia or Japan or Europe.
Yeah.
And we will continue to do so because it's a very efficient way of providing some customer offer and minimizing my investment on products that are not so relevant for my strategy. The second one is partnerships in technology. And one good example is what we did with Wave. And we will continue doing so, finding partners that can help us accelerate our strategy. It doesn't mean that they will dictate our strategy. We have a clear strategy forward, and we will partner with companies that can help us accelerate or create more value to our strategy. So this is the second area of collaboration. And then you have maybe a third area, which is maybe what you are interested on, which is more capital tie-ups and whether we partner and build scale together with somebody. And it's true that scale helps, but scale for me is not the objective. Scale is a means to achieve more competitive costs. If I can achieve competitive costs in a different way, I will do it all the time, right? But this is an area that we remain open to because of the volatility of the industry today. And as I've always been saying, as long as any partnership in this area brings value to my shareholders, protects the brand of Nissan and helps my sustainability of my employees moving forward, I will definitely explore it.
Volatility, which you mentioned, is on everyone's minds right now. Challenging enough to have this very complex strategy to execute for Nissan's turnaround, but then to layer on top of that not only this new tariff policy, but now all this turmoil in the Gulf. How is that affecting your strategy and your operations? Well,
we're monitoring the situation every day. It's very fluid. And the first issues that we are facing is delivery of product. So there is no routes into the Middle East. And this is what we are trying to overcome now by doing some smaller route utilization, trying to find alternative ways of delivering product to our customers. So this is one of the things that we are actively working on, and we have an expert team looking at this on a daily basis. Second one is we're trying to anticipate any disruption on supply of raw material. The derivatives of oil will at some point start increasing the costs because of the cost of oil going up. So we're trying to diversify our exposure to it. The third thing is trying to start planning ahead because if the oil price stays at the level it is today, we will start seeing a rising on all the logistics costs. And our business relies a lot on logistics because we source parts from many places and we're moving parts and cars all the time. And we need to anticipate this and try to become a bit more resilient on that area.
Well, Ivan, thank you so much. This has been a fascinating conversation, and we will wait with great interest to see how your turnaround strategy unfolds.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the time. Thank you.
Please welcome Garrett Langley of Flock Safety and Rohan Goswami of Semafor.
Garrett, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I want to jump in. I feel like most Americans had not heard of Flock until that Super Bowl ad.
Yeah.
Which you didn't put on.
Correct.
And which was maybe a flashpoint for reasons that you couldn't fully control. But it did highlight for me anyways, this real tension that most Americans, whether you're in a major city or suburbia, face. You want safety, you want security, but you're also terrified about some sort of dystopian panopticon world where you're constantly surveilled. Can you sort of briefly, first of all, lay out what Flock is for those in the audience who don't know, but also then walk us through why you think it's okay to compromise, it seems like, a little bit of privacy for some more safety.
Yeah, for sure. So Garrett started a company called Flock. We keep people and assets safe. What that means is we have a network of sensors, cameras, audio devices, drones that we develop here in America. And then we have this thing called Flock OS that integrates them together. It's an orchestration layer. And so we can protect one site to 1,000. And the easiest example would be, let's say for whatever reason, it's your choice, that if an F-150 came onto your facility between the hours of midnight and 8 a.m., you would not like that. You can actually just tell Flock, that's not okay. Drone would automatically launch, we'd detect it. It's literally security at scale. The challenge with that then is like, well, you're indefinitely making a trade-off between privacy and efficacy or safety. And I think for me, the way I look at it is if you look at two countries that are maybe a step ahead of us in this debate, you have a place like South Africa. South Africa has 600,000 private security guards, more than their police or military combined. And so if you're affluent in South Africa, it's actually very safe. You have a 9-foot wall, you have security guards. It's a beautiful place to live. You haven't been there. And if you're not affluent, crime is the cost of being alive. You can't afford to be safe. Now, if you compare that to a place like Tokyo, Tokyo has 37 million people, just a couple dozen homicides a year. And whether you go to work at 2 a.m. or at 10 a.m., you're safe.
In fairness, Japanese jail does have a lot to do with that crime rate. It is
that's actually, there's no data to back that up.
Really?
All the data shows that the only reason people don't commit crime is if they believe they will get caught.
Interesting.
The efficacy is nothing to do with penalty. Because if you got to imagine the average criminal is making a Boolean decision in life. Will I get caught? And there's 50 plus years of research that proves penalties don't count. But so if you look at the difference, like Tokyo has chosen to make safety a right. South Africa has made it a privilege. And in America, we're somewhere in the middle. Because I think if you look at some cities, let's go to a place like Memphis, it's a very tough city to live in right now. Crime is high, clearance rates are low, it's really tough.
clearance rates for non-law enforcement, meaning how many cases actually get solved.
Yeah, so the whole reason I started the company is if you want to guess, if you kill someone in America, the national average is about a 50% likelihood of getting caught. Can you imagine that? You guys are all in business. Like 50% odds are pretty good. So a lot of people flip their coin. Stealing a car, 80% chance of getting away with it.
And that's how you guys, correct me if I'm wrong, started, was license plate readers, right? And you do lay out this case, and we had one of your big investors, David Ulovich from Andreessen on our podcast a few weeks ago, who laid out this vision of basically like start with that basic building block. If people aren't caught stealing cars, they will graduate to more and more crime.
Yep.
And then at the same time, I mean, obviously, I think SF is maybe a perfect example of this tension between a desire for privacy and historically a crime-struck, recently crime-ridden town. Maybe not so recently. Do you think that when you are balancing that tension between people wanting safe neighborhoods and at the same time not wanting to be surveilled, David wrote this thought piece about how SF has done a lot with your technology. Do you think that's a scalable model? Do you think that every city in America feels the same way about this?
No, and I think that's the whole point, is one of the beautiful parts about America, unlike other countries, is this is both a challenge and a benefit. If you go to a place like the UK, there's about 45 police departments, 45 municipalities. France has 2. In America, we have 18,000 separate law enforcement organizations, which means we have 18,000 local governments that make a choice of what laws they do and do not want to societally enforce. And so jaywalking is my favorite joke. No one enforces it. Some cities choose not to enforce immigration. Some cities choose not to enforce drugs. It's really none of our business. Our point of view is that law should be enforced, but every local municipality should have control over what laws they task their local law enforcement to enforce.
This is an argument that others have made, right, that we make the tools, it's up to people how they want to use them. And I say this because part of the controversy around your company is you don't, as far as I understand, work with the federal government.
Right.
But the federal government, specifically ICE, can co-opt or ask your local law enforcement partners for data that they then have been accused of or maybe substantiated of. They can then use in immigration raids, which is a controversial, very divisive topic. Have you had conversations with the federal government about, hey, maybe can we not use our products for this?
No, because I don't think it's my position to have that conversation. So you go pick your, let's keep talking about San Francisco.
Sure.
You go to a place like San Francisco, and I would bet, and I haven't done this, but I would bet if you walked through City Hall or the police headquarters, there are federal agents in that building because they collaborate, because local law enforcement is not effectively tasked to solve things like human trafficking, large-scale interdiction cases like drug trafficking.
Sure.
They rely on their partners. Now, in a place like California, they are very clear they do not want immigration to be enforced. And I think that's their choice. But I think that's a conversation that Mayor Lurie and Governor Newsom would need to have with the current administration.
You don't see,
and I say,
you want to step out of that. And again, this is an argument that technology companies have made time and time again. Microsoft made a similar argument around their services in Israel. Other big tech companies have said, we just make the products and we absolve ourselves.
But I would challenge you though, because we do a lot more than that, right? So we look at it and go, what are the ways this can get abused? So how do we drive accountability of the system?
What are the guardrails around, let's say, a jilted lover looking up his ex-fiancée and following them around using your technology?
Yeah, so here's a good one. So before Flock, this type of law enforcement data was stored in perpetuity. I think that's a massive failure of like risk avoidance. And so we store the data for 30 days.
How did you arrive at that number?
30 days,
Yeah.
good Goldilocks.
Okay.
And then if you push that further, we actually promote city councils, state legislators to write law that says this can be stored for this long. So in Washington, they have a law. Virginia has a law. Georgia has a law. California has a law that mandates data retention.
Are you in all 50 states?
Yes.
Which was the easiest to sort of sell your, what was the easiest sell for you? What was sort of, where did you start?
California.
California, okay.
Yeah.
And why was that, just scale?
I think there's a few things that are unique about California. One, they have a crime problem, which is not super, you can go look up the data. And then two, they're more apt to adopt new approaches. Like if you look at law enforcement, maybe some of this room wanted to be a law enforcement when they were kids. Most likely your kids will not go in public service. It is a field that has been tarnished reputationally, for better or for worse, but it has happened. And so enrollment numbers are down, so technology winds up being the only choice. And California has one of the most challenged law enforcement industries or agencies in terms of just general enrollment.
Yeah. I want to go back to the idea of being a maker of tools and not a decider of tools. Because there was a moment, a long moment from, call it 1990s, all the way through maybe this election where a lot of the Valley, and you're based in Georgia, but you're obviously a tech company, believed that there was some sort of societal mission to do good. And in doing that, as you do, but in doing that, they imposed a certain value set on their end users. Anthropic still does today. We will not serve or service for this purpose, that purpose, the other purpose. And that was actually quite popular with the public. You know, it backfired, but it engendered a lot of goodwill where people were actually rooting for these trillion-dollar corporations or rooting for billionaires. Tech has a PR problem now. People don't like big tech, and it seems like people should love your product. People should be they should be dancing through the streets going, amazing, my neighborhoods are safer, I feel better. They're not. Don't you think you would benefit, even from a sales and marketing perspective, if you were to say, you know what, no, we don't want our technology to be used in ICE raids or for, you know, the ends of the federal government here?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's very confusing that people are comfortable giving local law enforcement deadly weapons, a gun, a taser, yet they're afraid to give them the tools to keep us safe.
The tools meaning your technology.
Yeah, and we're not alone. There's other people that do what we do, but I do find it to be a very interesting debate. I think the difference is, because I imagine everyone in this room has a cell phone, and so if I was a decent computer programmer, which I'm decent, I could build a tool today using mobile device networks, i.e. advertising, and the fact that you use Google Maps and Uber and Waze, and I could pinpoint your exact location within down to a few feet, 24 hours a day.
I think there are services that actually do that.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we're not afraid of that because we can't see it. But when you can see a camera, it's something to point at when you're mad. And so I think the issue is not that people dislike my company, it's that they are mad and they need somewhere to point. And they're mad at the current federal administration because we didn't have this problem 2 years ago, we didn't have this problem a year ago. This is a current thing and it'll move past.
That's right. Have you thought about working with the federal government at all? Do you have partnerships with them at that level?
We don't, I mean, no, because I think for us, there's 18,000 cities to go after. Sure. We got plenty of work to do.
How many cities are you in now?
Just over 5,000 or 6,000.
What is the TAM here? I imagine, actually in an ideal world, people just stop needing to pay for your product.
That would be lovely. That sounds great. I would like to live in that world. I'd like for my kids to live in that world.
Right. But what is the TAM?
No, I mean, you look at it this way. What is the price you'd be willing to pay to be safe?
I don't know.
Like how much a year would you be willing to pay? How much do you pay for Netflix?
I have no idea.
I
have a terrible financial report.
Netflix is like $50 a month.
I would pay $100,000 a year to guarantee my safety.
You wouldn't pay that. I don't think you'd pay that much. I think you might want to, but the way we think about the TAM is, well, there's however many hundreds of millions of people in America. What is the cost of being safe? What is the price we're willing to pay? And for us, it's very important that that doesn't become a privatized privilege.
Sure.
We believe safety should be up there with clean water, safe roads. It should be something that every American has the benefit of. Let's
switch gears for a little bit. You guys obviously are focused only on America. And one of the products that you do put out and you offer are drones. And I want to sort of pick your brain a little bit. We are in the midst of a conflict with Iran. Maybe it's subsided, maybe it's not, we don't know. But it's highlighted a real asymmetry in how we respond to drone attacks. The Shahed drones that they field, these are taking lessons that they've learned in Ukraine. You deal with drones, you make drones, you think about drones all the time. What do we need to do in the US, right, for our sort of national defense purposes? What are the things you've learned about building these devices or these products that you think are applicable to war, to defending ourselves here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing for me is we tend to only talk about the end of the supply chain and not the start of the supply chain.
Okay.
So we want a drone that's built in America, manufactured in America, that has a supply chain that has, it looks like it's made in America. But then when you go a step further and you go, okay, well, what about some of the medium finished goods, like a propeller or a battery? And you go, okay, well, yeah, we can do that, but we're not that price competitive. And then you go a step further and you go to as simple as something like a bolt, which might seem boring to maybe people in this room, but our drone probably has 500 discrete parts in it. It's very hard to find a price competitive, high quality bolt.
How much does it cost to make one of your drones?
BOM is in the tens of thousands of dollars.
And you sell them for
$100,000.
Okay, so decent margins.
Yeah, I mean it's
for hardware.
Yeah, it's a good company. Yeah.
The Shahed drone costs something like $250,000 to make. We could not, I assume, make that in the U.S. for that price.
No, and I think that's the challenge is it will take the better part of a decade to be fully vertically integrated and have a reliable supply chain. But it's doable. We have the resources. We actually have the skills, but it is a choice we have to make.
Do we have the skills? Do we have enough skilled workers to do this?
I think we do.
At scale?
Yeah, because because the jobs will flow. Like if we make the decision as both either a state or a country that we want to do this, there are plenty of people who will grow into those roles. I think it's a misleading fact when people complain about or say, oh, we don't have enough skilled labor. I'm like, I actually don't think that's true.
Really? Even with what AI will do to the workforce and the idea that we are going to need more people, the theory that we'll need more people in blue-collar jobs, do you think we have enough folks doing that?
I do, and I actually think, I don't know if you saw this, the Lowe's CEO had a great quote of like, they're going to start also.
Was it at Semafor World Economy?
Yeah, he was talking about this.
Oh, shoot, then I should have seen that. That's really awkward.
Big push on blue-collar labor and on training. I think that's great.
I mean, yeah, there's a consensus there that we need more of that, but I am a little bit dubious that we can actually onshore our supply chain. We got rid of this for a reason, right? It is better and more effective from a capital allocation perspective, from a quality of manufacture perspective, to do just in time, to have a global supply chain. And I'm just sort of leery of that. The last thing I want to talk about is to go back to that Super Bowl ad. Amazon obviously walked away from your partnership after that ad. Were you surprised or maybe disappointed by that decision?
I mean, disappointed, sure. I mean, I've known Jamie for a long time, probably close to a decade. We started our companies around the same time. But I think the thing that was confusing to me is the media portrayed it as some major revenue impacting event. Neither company was generating any revenue from the partnership. If you look at the way policing works today, if let's say my neighbor's house gets broken into, a cop shows up at my door, knocks on it and says, "Can I get your camera footage?" And now I have a choice as a private citizen to say no, but imagine the audacious nature it would take to say no. You're intimidated, right? And Jamie and I agree that's not good. And so what we had built was...
The alternative was to have to opt out of sharing that? Or
the beauty of what we were proposing to build is a law enforcement officer could say, hey, there was a crime nearby. Would you like to share any camera footage you have? And if you click no, there's no audit, there's no accountability, there's no trail. You just disappear. And so it's a real bummer, in my opinion. Like, we weren't generating revenue. We think it was just to the betterment of society. And obviously, they received pretty material backlash from their Super Bowl ad, and they felt like that was something they needed to do, which is fine.
Very quickly, because we are over time here, is that a partnership you would ever revisit or you are considering revisiting? Have you been in talks with them about that?
We have a great working relationship, and I'm sure at some point we will find a way to do something again together. And like, we're both two very large companies focused on keeping Americans safe, and to me, it's inevitable we'll wind up doing something together.
Garrett, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Please welcome Anushka Salinas of Nunit, Sherry Weston of Sesame Workshop, and Amna Nawaz of PBS NewsHour.
Welcome. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Anushka, Sherry, great to see you.
Thank you for having us.
So we're going to talk about security in the digital age through a slightly different lens. The place of overlap for your two businesses is the focus on children 0 to 5, right? And their parents, really. So let's start with that. And Anushka, let's begin with you. For anyone unfamiliar, tell us about your company and what it is you're trying to do for those very young kids and really for their parents.
Yeah, so Nanit, if you haven't heard of it, because maybe you don't have young children, is a parenting technology company. We're a hardware software company that provides monitoring as well as a whole suite of tools that support families in that critical 0 to 5 age range.
Sherry, obviously everyone knows Sesame Workshop.
Hope so.
It's been a rough year, I do want to point out, for a lot of folks in this space.
Year for
many, Sesame included. So tell us about where you are now, how the company's doing.
Well, Sesame Workshop is the nonprofit. Most people think of Sesame Street as this, iconic television show. Sesame Workshop is the organization that produces Sesame around the world. So we have had, a more challenging year economically in the last year. The media landscape has changed drastically, so it's no longer the revenue it once was to support our mission-driven work. So as a nonprofit, we do have a diversified revenue stream. We're able to use our licensed product, our media distribution, and then philanthropic funding. But as that has changed, we need to do more philanthropic funding. But I'm really proud of where we are. We have the partnership with PBS, so we reach children across the country. We have Netflix, which now allows us to reach children in 190 countries. So we're reaching more children than ever before. So we're still standing, and I think it's just so important. I personally think the world needs Sesame and what we teach now more than ever. So I feel very purposeful in that.
I'm biased, but I would say I agree wholeheartedly. Anushka, let's talk about this topic now. In terms of the hardware, software you're putting out into the world here, what are some of the ways in which parents in particular are relying on technology in ways that they never did before? What are they using now they didn't before? And how does security factor into that?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that's happened with technology and parenting is ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. So parents every day have questions, right? They don't only have questions in that once every few months or once a year time frame that they're going to the pediatrician, right? They every single moment, 2 a.m. and everything in between, they have questions about, what's happening? Is this normal? What should I do? Am I doing a good job? And so what we see is that parents are going to ChatGPT and other LLMs at twice the rate of non-parents. So I'd say that's the biggest kind of change that has happened. And at Nanit, we really think about there's some great things there, right? Which is parents need support. Parents are finding ways to get support. Mm-hmm. But we operate in a closed loop system where our platform is powered by a suite of monitors, smart baby monitors. And it's a closed loop, and it's giving you science-backed insights that are personal to you and your family. So we're actually putting objective data to these challenges that families experience every single day. And we're able to give them insights that are not generic, but they're actually personalized to their family. And we think that's really critical, especially in this world where anxiety is kind of at an all-time high for everybody, but especially for parents.
Can you say more on that? What kind of insights are you giving people? What's the data?
Yeah, so the company really was founded with sleep at the core, which is critical. Sleep is the foundation of health, especially for young children. Fun fact is that a child's brain is 90% developed by the time they're 5 years old, which is a little scary. I have a 5-year-old. I hope I didn't screw it up. But we provide sleep insights, but we've really expanded significantly into safety, right? So is my child breathing? Really critical concern if you have a 6-week-old or a 3-month-old, all the way through child development. Are they meeting their milestones appropriately?
So Sherry, obviously the direct focus for you is on child well-being and that critical 0 to 5 range. And there's a lot of talk about the worrying impacts of technology, of exposure to tech and parents relying on tech when it comes to kids at that age. How do you look at that? What are some of the concerns you have?
Well, Anushka's right. The most critical time in a child's development is those first 5 years because their brain is developing faster than any other time. And it's why Sesame is always focused on preschool when we could have the greatest impact. And I think with the digital world, children are growing up in a digital world, like it or not. That's not going to change. And we really look at it just in both sort of the risk and the opportunities. But the most important thing, what is essential, is to maintain the engagement between a caring adult and a child. So there are all sorts of opportunities and positive where you can use digital technology. We have a lot of proof how that can be used constructively to teach and to help children develop, as long as that's quality. It's not just safe, but it's high quality and developed with children's growth and development in mind.
Define high quality for us. What does that look like day to day?
You know, if you look, I think one of the greatest resources, because children, I mean, parents are struggling. You know, technology is growing faster than ever. AI, and I think parents have what is high quality and what defines high quality. And again, AAP will talk about what that media should include, when it's about modeling pro-social, social-emotional learning, when it's encouraging critical thinking skills, play. I mean, I have to add a plug, of course, but I do love that on their website, the American Academy of Pediatrics does recommend PBS Kids and Sesame Workshop. So
it's science.
Yes, yes.
Anushka, pick up on that point here, this idea that parents are relying more on tech, right? It's just part of the parenting landscape now, I'd say an integral part. But this also, the balance and the concern about tech as a distraction or an attention vacuum, right? As a replacement for parental involvement or care. How do you look at that in terms of the products that you offer and the guidance you give?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an important question. Listen, technology is certainly not replacing parental involvement. I think if you look at the trend over the last 50 to 60 years, parents are spending more than 2 times as much time with their parents than they did, you know, in previous generations. And dads are actually leading the pack there, which I think is amazing, right? There's a lot of negative narratives there, but actually when you look at the data in the entire developed world, it's really, parents are spending a lot more time with their kids. So I think that's a great trend. But I mentioned anxiety, right? And I think parents are really stressed, right? And it's having all kinds of impacts on mental health, on, you know, birth rates, on all of that. And so we think very much about how do we provide a whole lot of data, objective information to parents, but do it in a very simple way, right? The reality is, you know, if you think about a mother of a young child, she's got a mental to-do list that's going all day and night long, right? And our goal, and I think technology's role, is to help alleviate some of that, to take the mental and the physical to-do list, right? I'm writing down naps, I'm writing down when I last fed the child to make sure that they've had enough to eat. Our goal is like, take that away, take that off of a parent's plate, automate it, and allow them to actually reduce their anxiety, feel more confident in the decisions that they're making. A lot of what we do in our product, and I would say what technology should do, is help parents feel more confident, right? Because ultimately parent instinct, like, we're not about replacing parent instinct. We want to give parents great data and information to make them feel confident in their decisions. And so it's about taking things away that are already happening, like writing down the nighttime feedings and writing down the sleep schedule and doing the mental math on what time should they nap. We're taking all of that away and automating it so that families can actually focus on being there and connecting with each other.
What kind of concerns do you hear from parents about? I imagine every time there's data collection, in particular about your infant, right? They have questions or they have concerns. What do you hear from them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we do get that question. I think parents are concerned about privacy and security, and our approach on that is like, you know, very, very clear, closed loop system. We never sell your data. Your data is only ever used to inform you about what's happening with your child and your family. So we, you know, I'm a mother of 2, one of the few female tech CEOs out there. We take this really seriously, and I take it seriously. So that is a concern. But I think what we hear from families is the biggest thing they're worried about is child safety, right? Is, you know, is my little one going to be okay? Yeah. Are they breathing, right? And so those are the concerns that we focus a lot on.
There are so many novel factors we're dealing with at this time, like a conflation of a lot of these things we haven't had to before, but at the same time, does it feel to either of you, Sherry, I'll begin with you, like we've had some version of this conversation before when it comes to concerns over kids and tech and exposure? Do you look to any recent moment in history to say, okay, we can learn from how we did that, that was bad or this is good, and we can carry that forward?
Well, listen, I think one of the challenges whenever a new technology or particular media platform is created, children are often an afterthought, and yet they end up gravitating to those platforms. You know, one of the things, we have something called the Joan Gans Cooney Center, which is an independent research innovation lab named after the founder, the creator of Sesame Street. And it was designed just to work with tech companies and try to get them to understand how important it is to add child-centered thinking into the design phase. And so I think we've learned, listen, we've learned that through neuroscience how important those first 5 years are and how a child learns through that engagement. And I think we've also learned that technology can be used in a positive way or can be harmful. And I think one of the other things, like what you've created is fantastic, it's a tool for the parent. Where we focus is where parents are using digital technology, digital media with children. What's too much? What's safe? And I think parents struggle with that too. And again, if you can look at opportunities where it's a catalyst for more engagement between adult and child, again, tips where you have one iPad, not one for each person. So it encourages more use of that as a family. It allows you to understand more what's being used. There are all sorts of tips like that and resources for parents. But any time you can use that as an opportunity to engage, it's going to enhance the learning. I have to say, I will tell you, one of the things I love about the creation of Sesame Street is Joan Cooney, who I mentioned. You know, this is 1969, 56 years ago, and she had a hunch that the learning would be deeper if an adult were watching with a child. So the reason they had Muppets, celebrities, musicians, humor, was very deliberate attempt to engage adults as well as children. And I think that's one of our key assets because it's how we can engage at different ages and be, again, more of an opportunity for parents and children to share those experiences. And it's also very helpful in taking that learning off screen to enhance the learning.
So does that lesson carry now? I'm just curious. If the parent and child are both engaged in the tech, that's a better learning experience for the child too?
Absolutely. Anything.
Right, yeah.
Listen, we do a lot of resources too where we're encouraging Elmo's, you know, it's about videos that talk about Elmo putting down the screen and getting outside. We're doing a lot around nature. I mean, it's really important that we're not just, that we're helping children develop those self-regulation skills, those critical thinking skills, and sometimes that means put down the screen, right? Even though we create Sesame Street. But anything, there's just nothing more important than engagement, human engagement between adult and child.
Anushka.
It's so funny. We have a parallel in our business, which is, you know, we're a smart product. It's app-based, which means, you know, everyone in the family can have access to what's happening with the child, which is fundamentally different than the way, you know, traditional baby monitoring used to happen. It was like a walkie-talkie, and whoever was on the other end of the walkie-talkie was the lucky recipient of the information. And what we see now is that almost 50% of our users are dads, right? Back to that point around dads are more than 2x, spending more than 2x as much time as they did 50, 60 years ago. And so what we're finding, we actually just ran this large-scale study of over 1,600 families. What we found is that, like, I think really surprising, which is that families that use our product, right, and everyone's able to see the same information, no one's the gatekeeper of that, no one's the only person that's the expert in the child, is that relationships are actually improving, right? So relationships between caregivers, husband and wife, very often are actually better after having children than they were previously, which to me as a, mom was home today, on maternity leave, but by the time dad came home, he was able to see what happened, so he didn't need to ask for a 10-minute recap, and that took the pressure off of mom. So to the point of relationships, right?
But I think it would be I would think if you had an older sibling, it would also be a great learning opportunity to be explaining to that sibling why this milestone is important, et cetera.
It's good for the whole family, in other words, right?
Exactly.
Well, let me ask you this as we close out our conversation here to kind of make it real for everyone. You do have young children right now, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So what is, in your own life, outside of your own product, what's a piece of tech that you absolutely rely on every day in a way that parents maybe didn't 10 or 15 years ago? And what's a piece of tech you would not bring into the house?
Pressure that, societally or, we even put on ourselves and helps, facilitate that parenting in a more shared way so that when you come home, you can actually be more engaged and spend quality time with your children?
Well, so if I did have young children, my youngest is now 23, but if I had infants, I would definitely want a nanette. But I will say something that I would never have, and that we've made a decision at Sesame, is because a lot of people came to us and wanted us to do prototypes and test anthropomorphic toys. And I've said absolutely not, we will not do that, because I do think that if you had an Elmo, an AI powered Elmo plush, that is a risk of competing with the important engagement between a caring adult and a child. And so I would not have anthropomorphic toys.
So we're not going to see that on the shelves anytime soon.
No. And if I had it to do all over,
yes,
having a 23-year-old son, I would have had more boundaries and rules. You know, when they want their first phone and they would do anything to get it, if that's when you say it's going to live in the kitchen and we're going to only have certain media times. You know, I think there are so many strategies now that I wish I had used. It wouldn't be that you're not going to ever have that technology, but here's how we're going to, sort of handle that in a more responsible way.
I am carrying all these lessons with me. We walk out in the stream. Sherry Weston, Anushka Salinas, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Please join me in
Thank you very much.
Please welcome Norway's Minister of Finance, Jens Stoltenberg, and Hadley Gamble of IMI.
Once again, good morning, everybody. My name is Hadley Gamble. I am Chief International Anchor for IMI and a contributing editor here at Semafor. It's wonderful to be joined by this gentleman, Finance Minister of Norway, but also the former Secretary General of NATO. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Okay, first question. In your mind, is the NATO alliance at risk?
Well, at least now I need to answer in a diplomatic way. So the reality is that the NATO alliance faces some severe problems and challenges. There is no way to hide that, because everyone that reads a newspaper or watches TV will be able to see that there are some serious disagreements between allies, and in particular between some European allies and the United States. Having said that, I think we also need to remember that NATO has faced many crises before, starting with the Suez crisis in the 1950s, or when France actually left the military cooperation within NATO in the 60s, or the Iraq War. So we have been able to overcome disagreements before, and I really hope and believe that we can do that again. It's not given, it's not written in stone that we'll manage, but it's for us to take a responsibility to maximize the likelihood for that to happen. And I think the important message there is that the main criticism from the United States and from President Trump has not been against NATO. It has been against NATO allies not investing enough in NATO. And that has changed. European allies have really stepped up. There are now several European allies, like Poland, the Baltic countries, my own country, Norway. We are spending a larger share of GDP on defense than the United States. So things have changed and continue to move in the right direction. That's the first reason I believe that NATO can prevail. The second reason is that I believe in interests. that matters. And for the United States, it is good to have a strong NATO is good for Europe, that's obvious. But a strong NATO is also good for the United States. The United States is big, it's 25% of global economy. But together with NATO allies, we are 50% of the global economy and 50% of the world's military might. So it makes the United States safer to have friends and allies, something that Russia and China doesn't have at all. If I can add one more thing, and then you can interrupt me. This is not
he knows me well.
Yeah, this is not only about resources, money. We are pouring in more resources and more money, more forces, more readiness, more capabilities. That's important. But it's also about geography. I'm from Norway. We have a land border with Russia. Just on the other side of that land border, we have the Kola Peninsula. That's the place in the world with the highest concentration of nuclear weapons. Submarines, long-range bombers, missiles. Those nuclear capabilities are not aimed at Norway or Oslo. They are aimed at Washington, New York, Chicago, the United States. And we track them, we monitor them, we hand over daily intelligence to the United States. So we have early warning, so we track the submarines and actually help with homeland defense, just the fact that we have Norwegian presence so close to those nuclear capabilities. That makes you safer, so NATO is good for the United States.
What happens if the president pulls out of NATO?
Then we are all less safe. Europe is less safe, and the US is less
What about the cost? Because European defense
well,
countries are not prepared.
Then of course, first of all, I don't believe that will happen. But of course, I'm not issuing guarantees. No one can issue that kind of guarantees. But the reason why I believe it won't happen is that partly Europeans are addressing the main complaint that we didn't spend enough, which was right, but it's changing. And second, because I think that the US will realize that it makes them less safe, or you less safe. And the purpose of NATO is actually not to wage a war. The purpose of NATO is to prevent the war. By sending a clear message to any potential adversary that an attack on one will trigger a response from all, and as long as that is credible, there will be no attack.
So is the president wrong to call out NATO for not actively getting involved in the Strait of Hormuz?
But he's not wrong in saying that NATO has not contributed actively to that military operation. But if you want NATO to contribute, then at least you have to sit down with NATO allies, as you did after 9/11. And that was the first and only time we have triggered Article 5. And hundreds of thousands of European soldiers actually been deployed in Afghanistan. 1,000 have been killed in the military operation that was a direct response to an attack on the United States. That was a NATO operation. The Iran war there were never any, issue. It was never, you cannot expect us just to be there without any consultations, any discussions in NATO before you take the decision to launch the attack. Second, of course, many European allies question whether this is the best way of getting rid of the regime in Iran and the best way of degrading or stop their nuclear programs.
Is it?
Well, I supported the alternative strategy, and that's also the Norwegian position, and that is sanctions, diplomatic, economic pressure, helped us to reach one deal to limit their nuclear programs some years ago. And I am uncertain whether the campaign we see today actually will lead to a better situation for all the people in Iran. We all condemn what the regime in Iran does against their people. They have killed thousands of people, and we all condemn their nuclear program. The question is only, how do we maximize the likelihood for achieve what we all want? And it's not obvious that what's going on now is the best way of achieving that.
In your mind, what role should NATO have in the Strait of Hormuz?
I think that NATO could, but that's some European allies are not ready to do, is to be directly involved in an armed conflict against Iran.
Is Mark Rutte getting it right in his strategy with President Trump? Because he's getting criticism both ways.
Well, Mark Rutte is a close friend. We were prime ministers together for several years. When I was prime minister of Norway, he was prime minister of the Netherlands. Then we worked together when I was Secretary General of NATO for 10 years. And he has the same difficult task as I had when I was Secretary General, and that is to keep this alliance together. It's a big family, 32 allies. So
but would you have called the US president Big Daddy?
But he faces a different challenge, and I will not be kind of sitting there and commenting on everything my successor does.
You're a good friend.
And a good friend, but I would just recognize that he has a very difficult and important task. I had my words, my language. I remember my favorite line was that the clear message from President Trump on defense spending is having an impact. And that was correct, and I still believe it. That you can agree or disagree with Trump on many issues, but the clear message that Europeans have to spend more had an impact. And President Trump liked that, and it helped. So I think it's important finding some lines and then stick to them, and that's what I did. And then I have great confidence in Mark Rutte that he's doing this as good as possible in a difficult situation.
Tell me this, Vladimir Putin, we're not talking about him that much these days. In your mind, how is Russia today in terms of their economic health and also in terms of, frankly, the fight against Ukraine?
Well, Russia today and Vladimir Putin is very different than we expected them to be back in 1999 or 2000 when he became president. And I met President Putin the first time in August 2001. I was a newly elected Prime Minister of Norway. He was a newly elected President of Russia. And for many years, I worked closely with him. We opened up actually the border between Russia and Norway for visa-free travel. We had big energy projects together. And we all believed that Russia would move in a more democratic way. And NATO, not only Norway, but also NATO established something called the NATO-Russia Council. So we all believed that this was a kind of beginning of a new era. At some stage, that started to change, particularly in 2008 when Russia went into Georgia. And then, of course, after 2014, when they annexed Crimea and went into Eastern Donbass just after that. Fundamentally, I think that for Russia, it has been a big strategic mistake and defeat to go into Ukraine. Because their main goal, and they expressed that in a letter to NATO, to me, back in 2022, that the main goal was to have less NATO. They're getting the exact opposite. They wanted us to withdraw our forces from the eastern part of the alliance. NATO has deployed more forces in the eastern part of the alliance than ever before. In Romania, in Poland, the Baltic countries, as a direct response of that invasion. They wanted us to guarantee no further NATO enlargement. Finland and Sweden have become members of NATO as a direct consequence of the alliance. And with Finland in, NATO's border with Russia has doubled. And the Finns know how to fight a war. So to have them on board is good. Also the Swedes, of course. Yeah, I like the Swedes, but we were under Swedish rule for 100 years. We got our independence from Sweden in 1905. So for Norwegians, we like the Swedes, but we say that it's not. For instance, sports, the most important thing is not to win, but to beat the Swedes.
Tell me this. If you look back, and you've got the benefit of hindsight, obviously, in your years as Secretary General, in your mind, what was the great mistake that the West made in underestimating Vladimir Putin?
It was a mistake that we too slowly recognized that we could not trust Russia, too slowly recognized that that requires that we have to invest more in defense, so we were too slow. And had we had more, also stronger defense forces, and also supported Ukraine earlier. Again,
well, I remember we did an interview just ahead of the war, and the Ukrainian foreign minister at that time, Dmytro Kuleba, said, we need to pre-sanction Russia. They are coming for us. And you and I talked about it.
Yeah.
And we didn't do it.
No, but I can't remember exactly what I said, but I hope that I said something like we need to support Ukraine, because the reality is that if NATO allies have supported Ukraine from 2014, when Russia first went in, and armed them and equipped them, then at least Ukraine would have been in a much stronger position today. And maybe they have actually been able to deter a Russian invasion. Because Russia has been trying to take Ukraine since 2014, full-scale invasion in 2022, and still they don't control Donbass. It's a huge failure for them. And now they're losing like 1,000, perhaps a bit more soldiers per day. And that's approaching now the level of the number of soldiers they're able to recruit. This has now turned into a war of attrition. everyone thought that Russia will win a war of attrition. That's not obvious. It may actually be Ukraine that is winning this war of attrition, partly because they have, they have the advantage of defense. They have advanced technology when it comes to drones. In the beginning, 80% of the casualties were caused by artillery. Now, close to 90 or 80-90% of the casualties are caused by drones. And Ukraine, partly helped by the United States, but also by Norway, have developed a drone technology which goes far beyond what other NATO allies have been able to. So put this together, Russia really struggles on the front line. They have not been able to gain any territory the last year, despite all these casualties, 1,000 days approximately, and the Russian economy struggles.
And yet higher oil prices are good for Russia.
Yeah, the higher oil prices, of course, helps them a bit. That's also a dilemma with the war against...
and I've visited Russia several times since the start of the war. The economy is ticking over.
What do you mean?
Ticking over.
Yes. For instance, the interest rate is close to 16%. And then the official that's a number we know. Then the official inflation rate is, according to them, 6%. If that's correct, they have extreme high real interest rates. I think it's more likely that the inflation is not 6%, it's much higher. Because they have a war economy, which is under heavy pressure. They have an enormous lack for workforce. They're sending many people to the front. Hundreds of thousands young men have left. And the war economy is taking such a toll on the rest of the economy, so they struggle on the front, in the economy. So if we continue to support Ukraine will actually prevail and prove that it was a big strategic mistake of Putin to invade Ukraine. And it's our responsibility to make sure that that happens. We support Ukraine, Norway. I hope that the US will continue to do the same.
Tell me this. Let's talk about the money before I let you go. Norway, biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world. You're being hit from both sides because on one hand, higher oil prices, good for your sovereign wealth fund, but on the other hand, you're one of the 10 investors in US companies. Yeah. So anything that moves on the stock market impacts your network.
Yeah. So I am in that very strange position that most people move forward in their life. I started to move backwards. I was Prime Minister for 10 years. Before that, I was Minister of Finance, and now I'm back in the position as Minister of Finance I had 30 years ago. That's a paradox, to be honest, but it works well for me, at least. One aspect I like with that is that the year I became Minister of Finance the first time, in 1996, at the beginning of that year, it was 0 in the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. The first installment was made in 1996. Today, it's more than $2 trillion, out of which half, actually 55%, is invested in the US, most of it in equity, meaning that the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund owns, on average, 1.5% of every US-listed company, and we are among the 10 biggest owners in every listed US company. That's good for Norway because the US stock market have gone quite well, but of course it also exposes for the risks you all have, we all see in the stock market. But I can just tell you that we plan to continue to be a big investor in US companies and to have roughly half of our investments there because the American stock market is so dynamic and reflects the strength of the US economy. But it makes us, of course, concerned when we see the consequences of the war in the Middle East with increased energy prices that can increase inflation, push down growth. And we have now the outlook from the IMF published this week, showing actually that there is a more uncertainty, but also risk for actually higher inflation, lower growth that will harm also equity markets in the coming months and years if this is the consequence of the war.
What do you think is the great risk in what's happening today in terms of China is watching?
Well, I think there are many risks and many opportunities. We all trade a lot with China, and that has benefited many of us. But there is a huge risk, and that is that we make ourselves too dependent on China and makes ourselves too vulnerable for coercion from China. And I sometimes use Russia as an example. Until the full-scale invasion, the majority of European governments meant that buying gas from Russia was a commercial decision with no political impact. It was a political decision because it made us vulnerable for coercion from Russia after full-scale invasion, where they stopped exporting gas to us to try to coerce us not supporting Ukraine. And we must not repeat the same mistake with China, to be too dependent on rare earth minerals, strategic commodities, to hand over key technology to them that they can use against us, or let them control key infrastructure in our countries. The big challenge is to find a balance between some trade, some economic engagement with China, without overdoing it and being too dependent. And if there's any answer to that, I think that one answer is to develop our own sources, for instance, for rare earth minerals. And again, Norway will play its part in that effort.
And finally, sir, talking about those risks, when you take a step back and look at what we've been through in the last several years, certainly since you and I have been doing these interviews, we had the global financial crisis, then we had COVID. Did we sleepwalk into another energy crisis?
And also because I think on fossil fuels. For different reasons, and then Norway has to find on fossil fuels for different reasons, and then Norway has to find something else to export than oil and gas.
You once told me that you wanted to be central bank governor of Norway, and I said, why? And you said, the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Yes.
What do you want to do next?
I don't know. I've never been able to follow my plans. I was actually appointed as the governor of the Norwegian Central Bank. But then I had to decline that because I will at some stage take over to be chair of the Munich Security Conference, which is an important platform for security dialogue, especially between the United States and Europe. Yes, so you'll find me there once.
Fantastic.
And Europe. Yes, so you'll find me there once.
Fantastic. Minister, thanks you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Please welcome Tarek Mansour of Kalshi and Gina Chon of Semafor.
Thank you. Hi. So we are here with the CEO of Kalshi, who you might have heard about in the news a lot lately. One of the big prediction market players that have become really popular recently. And with that has come, I think, a lot of noise, good, bad, and ugly. And so I wanted to kind of start off, Tarek, with you just talking about what this is exactly. I just looked on your people sort of, forecasting on, and what are the risks surrounding it? I mean, obviously there's been concerns about insider trading, access among youth and other issues. So what is it, and what should people actually be worried about when it comes to your business?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, thanks for having me. Very excited to be here. Let me recount a little bit of history of kind of really how prediction markets started and then where Kalshi sort of came around. So prediction markets have been a concept that existed well before Kalshi. So in 1945, there's an economist, Friedrich Hayek, who sort of defined this idea of a knowledge problem. Some of you in the audience may be familiar with this concept. And it was a very simple idea. It was the idea that most decision-making is done centrally by centralized authorities, whether it's a government or an executive suite or board, and you can go all the way down to sort of the household level. But the information that is relevant for the decision is generally very dispersed. It's not actually central. It's in all parts of the world. It's also local. It's fragmented. So you may have a piece of information, and Walt may have a piece of information that standalone doesn't make much sense, but if you combine them together, it makes sense. and it's dynamic. You have to be probing the nodes, the different sort of sources of information continuously. And his solution at the time, he didn't really call it prediction market. He called it a market. He said, we probably should apply markets to aggregating this information and let prices be the averaging function for that. It took another 40 years for the first sort of trial experiment to be run, and that was the University of Iowa. They ran this sort of small-scale election prediction market of geopolitical experts, a lot of which are probably in the room, and you pit them against a group of random people, but that are very curious, intellectually curious about the news, and are pretty good at just being consistent about on reading the news. The second group outperforms is broader. It could be political, it could be economic, weather, sports, like you mentioned. It could be really any question about the futures that people are essentially curious about, that they want to get an answer to. We then, this thing that we did a little bit differently as a company. We started a company in Silicon Valley, and everything is about moving fast and breaking things in Silicon Valley. We actually decided we want to build this as a legitimate financial market, so we spent 4 years up front getting it regulated by the government. So working with what ended up being our regulator, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC, and we did succeed in doing so. It did take us 4 years. It was pretty brutal. And I think after we got that sort of approval, prediction markets really became a thing. Now you can take it mainstream. That has to improve, and we can talk about that. And fast forward to today, so today Kalshi is doing around $250 billion of annualized volume. It's growing 20% month over month, 20 to 25% month over month. And we're definitely the fastest growing company outside of AI in America, and we're competing with some of the AI companies. And the thing that's happened that maybe we haven't kind of predicted back then, and part of the reason why these are growing so fast is that so there's a rise in sort of distrust in mainstream, like in traditional institutions that are basically delivering.
Like the media.
Like the media. I think there's a rise in distrust in the media, but I also think there's a rise in distrust, and we don't talk about this enough, in social media. It's not like a lot of people that are sitting in this room, if we probe the room right now, like how much do you trust your Twitter feed? I would expect most of the room to just say, well, it's probably polarized, and we say all these crazy things. Because yes, these algorithms do incentivize clickbait. If you say a smart, nuanced take on Twitter, you probably get 4 likes. If you say something crazy on Twitter, there's no bearing on the truth, you get 400,000 likes. The opposite incentive structure exists in prediction market, right? If you're the former and you say something nuanced, you will probably make money. You're self-calibrated, you're smart, and these are the people that we attract. And if you say something crazy, you'll probably lose money. And so over time, you get moved out of the system. And I think that has really propelled and accelerated the adoption of prediction markets, both from a trading perspective, which is 30% of our customers, 20 to 30, but the vast majority of our customers use it as a newsfeed. They use it to get informed about what's happening in the world. Where do you want to go next? Insider trading?
Yeah, yes, actually. I did want to ask you about that. And not just the market risk, but also, consumer protections. You have this fight now between the state and federal regulators of who should have oversight. As you mentioned, you have the CFTC, but a lot of states want to get involved. They see this as gambling, and that's something that should be regulated at the local level. How big of a problem are the risks, and what should the protections be, especially around this consumer aspect? Because now you do have the CFTC, but that's not really their remit.
So let me decompose this. Let me first address insider trading, and then let's just talk about the states. And I think there's kind of 2 separate issues. Part of what it means to get regulated as a financial market is market integrity. That's one of the pillars. There's market integrity and then customer protection, which we'll talk about in a second. Market integrity is essentially you need to build a marketplace that has a set of rules, and those rules need to be fair, right? And one of those rules is you should avoid insider trading because that's unfair. And I go back, and there's now that it's, in some ways we're revisiting history. That tends to happen a lot in financial markets. When stock market came along, it was should insider trading be banned and not? And there was all sorts of arguments for why it shouldn't. Same with prediction markets now. And our view at Kalshi is that it should absolutely be banned. And the same reason it's banned in the stock market is because if insider trading is rampant in a market, including the stock market, what will happen is people will stop trading. No one wants to participate in a system that is not intrinsically fair. A lot of the headlines that you read, maybe, I mean, I don't know if fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know, but like it's not on Kalshi. It's happening on Polymarket, which is based offshore. It's not regulated under US law today. I mean, they acquire an exchange, but that's not really, it's 1-2% of their volume today. They're regulated in Panama. I don't know what the laws of Panama are on insider trading on prediction markets, probably not existent, but like the point here is that these headlines, usually the war markets, they're not on Kalshi. We don't have these markets because everything is public. All the trading activity, the trade log is public in real time. So regulators can see it, the media can see it, the traders can see it, and they can flag suspicious activity. And then we can impose fines all the way to criminal prosecution. So we've released some cases, there's more coming. But over time, it's going to be a bit of a chicken and the egg. There's always going to be bad actors. The goal is to just squash them, find them and deter them.
Do you see a world where these become, outside the CFTC, where the Justice Department gets in and they become criminal probes?
I mean, the Justice Department does get into insider trading cases, both in CFTC and SEC-regulated exchanges. So if you commit insider trading on Kalshi, that can and will at some point be a federal crime. I mean, it is a federal crime. Like you can be prosecuted by DOJ. I actually do expect the DOJ to prosecute some of these cases. It's a bit harder on offshore exchanges because they don't have KYC.
Sure.
So you don't know who's trading. You're just sending some Bitcoin to a wallet and then you trade, which is why bad actors go there, because why would you go to the place that does KYC, which is Kalshi, and reports your activity to the government? You talk about the states, unless you want to talk more about insider trading.
Well, I just want to ask you, in terms of insider trading, because when you see it, when it comes to traditional equity markets, a lot of times it's around deals, M&A transactions, someone has insider knowledge, but that's a relatively small group of people who may know that. But, we're talking about what's the forecast on a bunch of tech employees being laid off? Like the universe of people who may know that, be involved in that seems to be a bit larger. And so how do you ban that? How do you
I'm not sure I agree with that, because the tech layoff at Snap that happened yesterday or today, I forgot, the same exact universe people could trade on the stock, and that would be insider trading if they knew beforehand, right? Like so the universe of people that could commit insider trading on the stock is actually quite large. Like if you look at Tesla, the number of people that know of a product release beforehand is obviously a big chunk of the employees, and then probably their spouses and their cousins, and how do you find the cousin that's buying a Tesla option before, So there is, insider trading is a real risk in the stock market. It's a real risk in prediction markets. There's no question about that. The thing that we advocate is the existence of bad actors in a system should not invalidate the system, right? It should validate regulation. That's why we're pro-regulation as a company. It's like regulation is not, when people talk about customer protection, it's not like you stop the thing. It's you figure out how to solve that hard problem, like AI. We don't stop AI when you regulate AI. What we want to do is figure out how to add guardrails that do prevent insider trading, that, what kind of data sharing should we do with basically the source agency? How do we improve our systems over time? Could we use AI, which we do a lot, in flagging suspicious patterns and automating workflows? The risk is very real, but I think it's not an impossible risk to solve. It's a hard problem. It's been solved. Well, it hasn't been fully solved, but it's been largely solved in the stock market. And I think over time it will be solved in prediction markets.
Yeah. So let's move over to consumer protection, because arguably, insider trading, obviously it's illegal, it's a crime, but people aren't hurt in the same ways, that when it comes to some of the consumer protection issues. So where do you see that regulation, especially with the states fighting? It's becoming, a bigger issue here in Washington, especially when it comes to access among youth, these gambling debates, et cetera.
So customer protection is, I would say, a very real concern. I would say in any financial market that has broad retail participation, right? It's true for prediction markets, it's true for sports betting, it's true for crypto. It's definitely true for zero data expiry options, where something like 80% of customers lose within a month or two. Any financial markets where you're going to have retail exposure is going to see speculative activity. Actually, any financial market is going to see speculative activity. Now, retail has a heightened risk, or a real risk. We don't think much about protecting institutions because they know what they're doing. So, a few things. That's something we take very seriously. I think we have a really meaningful opportunity to get it right this time, because what you see with a lot of the kind of questions around addiction, and people talk about problem gambling in the states sort of regulate sports books, this has become a real issue, mostly because state regulation has sort of failed. You have a patchwork of state laws there's, I think, something like 34, 35 states where sports betting is legal. Out of those 34 states, one of them bans marketing to people that have a problem. That's kind of crazy. 2 of them ban marketing, explicit marketing to minors. Kind of crazy, right? Like, but even if not, like the patchwork doesn't work, because if you have a problem and you have clearly put yourself on a list that you have unhealthy behaviors in one state, all you have to do is to, go to another state and you can like basically bet on, the sports book again. So, and we've been talking about a federal framework for pre-prediction markets. Like, could we establish a set of rules that are uniform across the board around how these things should be marketed? What are the right reasonable protections? How do you put, when should we market to someone, when should not market to someone? And that's something we're very proactive in at Kalshi. I think we should have more rules in that direction.
At a federal level.
For sure, because then you have uniform rules. But the thing that's key here, prediction markets incentive structure are clean. Like, it's a bit like when the taxis came after Uber and said like, oh, it's unsafe. No one here believes that like Ubers are intrinsically less safe than taxis. Like, there's issues in both. In some ways, Ubers have had the opportunity to make it safer because you can track people on the app. It's digital. You can have parents or others track you. And I think prediction markets offer that same sort of opportunity. There's obviously going to be legacy incumbents that are going to be fighting it, but that's okay.
Yeah, and so on the minor access issue, how are you, because social media has had to deal with this a lot too, and we've seen, in Australia, they've just done a blanket ban in terms of access. That's, yeah, but it's dependent though on obviously ID checks and things like that they can
Which we do that.
fake.
Yeah, I mean, the fake problem. We think about this a lot. It's interesting. Like, yeah, mine is cheat, like anybody. They take the parent's ID and they have all the information, they buy an account. But like, we've been thinking about this a lot. The way that so that's a very serious concern. I think honestly, it's a concern for us. It's a concern for all the other markets that I've described. A few things. One is we are launching a portal for parents to basically submit their identification, even if they don't want to be users of Cash, to see if someone is using it. Because then they can see if their children are using their ID and police it. 2, we're launching this kind of notion of family accounts where people can track each other's activity. Because again, this thing shouldn't be about like, again, our incentive is for informed forecasts. That's how we make money. The more volume, the more accurate, the more, our top line. And so how do we kind of create a sort of accountability structure amongst friends and families for people to like, hey, you might be doing a little bit too much here. Like, we want this to be a tool for good, not a tool for excessive behaviors. And then I think last is like there are patterns. Like, AI is getting very smart about recognizing kind of how the phone is being used and sort of ID. So we're also adding selfies to accounts where you can basically look at the face of a person and it can tell you if like, obviously if this person is not the actual parent that's 50 years old. But there's a lot more to do.
And just before we go, because we are out of time, I did want to ask you where this goes next, because it's a maturing market and, starting to see the market players, issues around sort of liquidity and how to, maintain that, other aspects of market making, et cetera, that do we start to see this look more like the mature financial markets that we see today?
I think absolutely. I mean, it's a little bit like the trajectory of crypto, but compressed much faster. Because I think the use case is a bit more clear, especially for institutions. So 26, I think what we're seeing is a dramatically accelerating adoption from institutions. So it's starting with the data. So it's that the product market fit for the data is very clear. Like, institutions want this to be incorporated into their models. Like, what are the prediction markets saying about politics, geopolitics, all of that?
Because it's like a news feed, as you said.
It's a news feed, but also it's a differentiated source of alpha. Like, of signal. And historically, if you want to learn about what's happening with the Strait of Hormuz now, like you can listen to pundits on both sides, and there's always like a political spin and like a lens. But prediction markets don't have a lens. There's no spin. It's just people with skin in the game that are predicting this thing. And we've shown now. I mean, there was a Fed paper a month ago. I don't know if you've seen it. It was called Kalshi and the Rise of Macro Markets. And the Federal Reserve put out a paper saying that like this is the best. Kalshi is the best thing we have right now to forecast the economy. On Fed, inflation, GDP, unemployment, et cetera. And
forget all those economic macro models.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. I don't think you can, actually, because prediction markets, like markets, do take from the economic macro models, right? Like, and people always say, is it going to replace the polls? Is it going to replace the media? No, like the polls make prediction markets better, and over time, prediction markets will make the polls better. The news makes prediction markets better because prediction markets do react to the news. Like, it's not a vacuum. It's not like an either or. It's actually an added data point that holistically will improve our understanding of the world. And then I was talking about, so the data is being incorporated, but then the second thing is, and this really kind of when I started the company, when I was at Goldman in 2016, the vast majority of the demand that we were seeing was essentially hedging against Trump winning the election. So you wanted to do the Trump trade. And at the time, what we sold at Goldman was like a short on the S&P. It was like a horrible trade, like, you know, and because actually Trump won, so people were right about the prediction, but then they lost money because the S&P rallied. So in 26, we're going to see this becoming a very kind of common thing, where instead of like trying to mimic the exposure that you're looking for in traditional markets, you can just take it directly in prediction markets. And that's something we're very excited about.
Well, we'll be interested in hearing more for you where that goes. Thank you so much, Tarek.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for attending today's live journalism and to our partner Citadel Securities. We hope to see you here for our afternoon programme at 1:30 p.m.